happy to have Ryan and Davis here from Hootsuite. And my name is Florence. I'm the moderator, so I'm the one asking questions. In addition to you, because we've decided that you guys can ask questions as you hear something that you feel like, oh, I want to know more about that. Just feel free to raise your hand, and we will bring a microphone to you. Good? Cool? Yes? You guys awake after lunch, carb coma? Okay. So I will let Ryan and Davis talk a bit more about their roles at Hootsuite and how it's relevant to our topic today, which is Facebook and Instagram strategy.
So I'll kick it off. So my name is Ryan. I'm the Global Director of Paid Social at Hootsuite. So essentially what I do is I work collaboratively with our entire organization and our clients to help them figure out paid social and how it merges with organic. So it's really about, from my perspective, how do we help our clients drive better results, reach their goals, both in merging organic and paid together.
Perfect. And I'm Davis Riar. I'm a senior business value analyst, and essentially what that means is that I tie tactical social media objectives to business outcomes. I do so through the use of research and analysis, and I look at that in terms of industry trends and best practices. And so working with that, I work across all of our strategic accounts at Hootsuite.
Awesome. Well, today our chat, which is going to be about an hour and say 15 minutes, is going to cover two main sections. The first one is going to be on Facebook. So without further ado, don't beat around the bush. I'm just going to get right to it. So Facebook, we do consider it, we perceive it as a more mature social media platform. So what are the fundamentals of it that differs it from Instagram, which is both owned by Facebook and also seen as a competitor for its attention of its consumers?
So I'll start it off. And so for those of you who don't, actually one little extra tidbit about me. So before Hootsuite, I was at Twitter for about 3.5 years. And I bring that up because for those of you who don't know, when Instagram first launched, they sort of took a page from Twitter. And the difference between Facebook and Instagram at the time was that Facebook was a private platform and Instagram was a public platform. And what that means is Instagram was really about connecting to people that you'd never be able to connect, like celebrities, people of influence that you'd never be able to connect with. And it brought you to a world that you'd never seen before. Versus Facebook was really about connecting that close connections to your friends, your family, your colleagues, what have you. I mean, think about it. For those of you who are on the platform, I can follow Kim Kardashian on Instagram, but I'm likely not friends with Kim on Facebook. Some of you might be, I'm not. I mean, so, that world is, Facebook and Instagram are trying to merge a little bit, but I think that fundamental still holds true in terms of the interaction with people, places, things that are just well beyond your own personal network, as you would think on the Facebook side. So that's sort of the fundamental, I would say, difference between the platforms and how they launched. And if you think about that, that also parlays into some of the biggest attributes that fundamentally makes Instagram quite unique to Facebook. And when we think about things like hashtags, and we're all familiar with hashtags, people use them all the time. There's a reason why hashtags are so prevalent and dominant on Instagram versus not so much on Facebook. Again, it's about that wider network and connecting to wider trends, people, places, things that you might not be connected with within your own group. The other big thing I would say is that if you look at Facebook versus Instagram overall, Facebook offers just a lot more. There's just so much more you can do from a user experience. And I'm guessing that everybody here, can I assume that everybody here has a Facebook account? Is there anybody who doesn't have a Facebook account?
Don't raise your hand or admit it.
Does anybody not have an Instagram account? Okay, so we're all, some people I think are kind of lying actually, I say no. So I'm assuming you're on both, and you might use them for different reasons, but ultimately, if you think about Facebook versus Instagram in general, Facebook offers just so much more breadth to it because it's been around a lot longer. And that was the idea behind Facebook. So think about other ways of using Facebook, things like groups. Groups exist on Facebook, but they don't exist on Instagram. We'll talk a little bit about groups as we go further in the session. But really, groups, I think, is a really interesting way of bringing people together with common interests. And from the real estate perspective, huge opportunities, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Think about marketplace, so buy and sell, that kind of thing. That's also available on Facebook, not on Instagram. If you also think about the way you access information and news, much more so on Facebook, for better or for worse. Good news, bad news, wrong news. You wouldn't necessarily access that type of content or go to those platforms for that type of content on Facebook versus Instagram. On the Instagram side, it's pretty simple. And that was the idea when they launched Instagram, was keeping it super simple, taking away all the extras and making it an image-based, video-based platform, and literally that's it. So it depends on what you want. And again, that idea of imagery and being able to connect with celebrities and what have you naturally brought on a younger demographic to the platform. So Instagram in general skews younger than it does on Facebook. Facebook is actually going older and older, while Instagram is going younger and younger. Not too young. The TikToks of the world are sort of taking the youngest of the young. But that's how you could think about the fundamental differences of the platform. And as we get in further, I'll help you understand when and where to use each platform for your marketing priorities.
Perfect. Great answer, Ryan. But to elaborate a little further, I just looked at the timelines of the platforms. LinkedIn was probably the only platform before Facebook that's still very prominent today. Now Facebook came out in 2006, and that meant a very much higher penetration rate for who's actually using the platform. So like Ryan said, it's almost a mass marketing tool, with the exception of the youngest generation, Generation Z, who's not frequently using Facebook either. They're streaming towards platforms such as Snapchat, Instagram, and more so now TikTok too. Now, when I look at certain these platforms, what I've noticed as well is that there's a certain trust and authenticity that's built on platforms like Instagram compared to Facebook. And the reason this is actually built from this insight is that you look at the timeline on Instagram. It's all content that you've either opted in for, something that you followed, or something that's going to be an ad that's really highly targeted to your audience. Take the Explore page on Instagram. That's all new content of different platforms and different pages that you haven't already interacted with. And so what's really unique here is that Facebook has it all on one feed. When I notice the difference between the two, if someone likes a post and it populates onto my page on Facebook, I haven't already opted in to follow that content. And essentially what that means is that I don't have that same trust and rapport built with that account either. And so when I look at the value of a piece of content on the Instagram feed versus Facebook, I weight Instagram's content significantly higher. I also look at things like Ryan mentioned as well in terms of the breadth of opportunities on Facebook. Facebook's even releasing a dating app as of recently where it integrates your profile right into the messenger, and you can find similar people with similar interests as well as mutual friends and connections. Instagram's not going to release that. They're going to stay true to their basics of being a core visual-based platform, and even if they are going to expand past that, it's just going to be in terms of things like Instagram TV and Instagram Stories. Another thing I thought was really unique about Facebook is that even though I stopped adding people on Facebook because I'm not really on the platform, I'm more active on Instagram, there's only one reason I personally, as a user, go back to Facebook, and that's for events. And so Facebook's great in terms of having that calendar and having an integrated calendar with non-social network calendars as well in your mobile device. And so this is a really important thing to keep in mind when you are targeting people for certain events as well, whether that be as a personal page who wants to set up just a party or an event, or as a business page who wants to drive people for a very timely based occurrence for something you want to sell them. And so I think that's very unique between the two. I'll draw one final comparison between Facebook and Instagram, is that Facebook almost serves people, the average user, like that personal CRM system. It's everyone who you've pretty much interacted with. You're very open with who you've added on the network primarily. And so as a result of that, these are the individuals who you might not frequently interact with. And if you don't interact with them on the timeline, they'll be deprioritized, but they'll always be on your friends list. Instagram, on the other side, you'll see a lot of people's content organically. But what that results in is that if you don't actually see value in that person's content, you'll often either hide that individual from the profile, you'll mute their stories, or you'll often unfollow them if the content's not valuable either. And so once again, bringing that back to my first point, the content that you see on an Instagram feed is often bred with trust and authenticity from people who you've highly engaged with and interacted with. And so in summary, I think the breadth of different use cases on Facebook is significantly different from the simplicity and the authenticity that Instagram builds.
So thank you for the very detailed answers. And it's very interesting when you mentioned that Facebook has a great breadth of different tools and services. Mm-hmm. So how would, let's say there's a lot of sole proprietors and small businesses in here, real estate teams, they are wondering how they could effectively and efficiently build their business presence on Facebook. Is it still possible to do that given that Facebook, a lot of it is pay to play right now? So what's your take on that?
On building a business from scratch?
Yeah, like what kind of tools would you recommend that they use? Organic tools, let's start with that.
Yeah, so I mean, well, we can look at organic and paid together really, but so if you're starting from scratch, and this is sort of leaning on what Davis was talking about, first and foremost, you need your own page. So if you don't have, I'm just curious, how many folks here have a Facebook business page? Okay, how many have an Instagram business page? Interesting. Okay, we're going to change that today. So you'll notice, and again, going back to the differences between Instagram and Facebook, first and foremost, when we're talking about Facebook and Instagram, when you're trying to decide one or the other, do I do this, do I do that, you're going to hear this coming from me a lot. Try, test, do both. I wouldn't necessarily pick one versus the other. You should be present on both for different reasons. And when we talk about strategies and what have you, I'll talk a lot about, I'm a really big fan of testing. You'll hear me say this a lot. Figure out what works as opposed to making your own decision up front. So first and foremost, you need a business page. And take some time when you're launching a business page on Facebook in particular. There's a lot of options. Use every available option to you. Your bio, your link description. There's even for those of you who don't have a Facebook business page, which is obviously the majority of you, you can even have a call to action button directly on your business page. Something as simple as call for more information, learn now, all different types of call to action directly on your business page. Your location, your business, everything you can include there, absolutely do to get this business page started. Now, and the same thing with Instagram, although the options are very limited in terms of what you can have from a bio perspective and additional information, but use as much as available with you for yourself. Images are really important. I'm sure you guys are all on the real estate side, so you guys, I'm sure, have beautiful, gorgeous headshots. I can see them all here right now. So, but think beyond just your headshot. Be original as much as you can, because there's a lot of you out there, and you're all trying to go after similar client bases. It's a competitive business. The next thing you're going to figure out is, great, I got this business page. Nobody follows me. So the problem you have right now, and the problem everybody has right now, is you're going to hear me say that content is king and make sure you have great content. I was just talking to somebody earlier about content. Well, you can create as much content as you want. What's the point if nobody sees it, right? So there's a couple ways of looking at this. In the olden days of social, that's weird to say, actually, I've never said it that way.
It's about 10 years ago.
Yeah, in the olden days, you published content and everybody saw it. That's just how it works. So now, in these days, it doesn't work that way. Davis talked about the algorithm. We're going to talk a little bit about that as well in terms of organic reach today, I'm sure. But really, you have to understand that content is really critical to success, but you have to make sure that people see it, which we'll talk about in terms of the idea behind paid advertising. So the first thing you're going to think about from an organic perspective is, I need to get as many followers as I can. How am I going to do that? Don't buy them. Don't pay for followers. You might be, you're going to get inundated with messages. Buy 1 cent a follower. These are bots. These aren't real people. People will see through that. Davis used the word authenticity. I can't stress enough. I agree with him 100%. Authenticity is really, really key. People can see through fake followers a mile away, and so can Facebook. They can track that, and then you go way, way down in their algorithm if you have fake followers. So just on that part of it. So how do you gain followers? Everybody asks me, how do I get them if I'm not buying them? So you don't want to pay, you don't want to throw all kinds of money out. Pay is one part of it, but really how you're going to do it is you're going to start off with a really great content strategy. And the way to start this off is, don't try to sell yourself right off the bat. Nobody wants someone walking right up to them, right in their face, trying to sell them something. Nobody wants that. We're going to get there. We're going to sell stuff, but we got to get there first. You got to prove yourself. So the way you're going to prove yourself is you're going to prove yourself through thought leadership. You're going to prove yourself with content, and you're going to provide value to people that are on the platform. Remember, as much as you think that people are coming onto Facebook to see what you have to say, they're not. They're not on that platform on Instagram or Facebook to go and buy stuff. You have to merge your way into conversations as best as you can, and you're going to do that by providing valuable content that people are interested in. So think about it. What type of content do you think someone would resonate in the world of real estate? What kind of stuff would people want to read? Things like that. Just so you know, I actually bought a house a week ago. So I was
from who? From who? Anyone in here?
I live downtown. For those of you who, I don't know if anybody works in the Danforth area, real estate is insane. We had 19 bidders on this house. Anyways, that's for another time. So you want to have the right type of content. So things like, and I've been happy to research this because I've been in the market, things that really gravitated to me, things like, the biggest mistakes buyers and sellers make, or 5 to 10 tips on how to choose a real estate agent. That was a big one for me because we didn't have somebody. All these tips and tricks, all this type of thing is the type of content people are interested in. So start building this content and you're going to see that people are going to be interested in what you have to say. This is the authentic way of driving a follower base and being able to be successful at social. Now, it's not going to happen in a day. Be patient. It will happen. So, and as we do that, the next things you have to think about, okay, so now I've built my brand, I've built my page, I have I'm creating all kinds of content, and it doesn't have to be just your content. There's nothing wrong with aggregating content that you think is great. You don't have to go out and write a million stories. If you can aggregate, do your research, Google as much as you can, find really relevant stuff, and you can be a content aggregator to help share really insightful blogs, white papers, tips, tricks, what have you, with your follower base. You got to start with the basics, so I would start with your friends and your colleagues, your family, get them all to follow you, and start that virality of sharing content, and that's the whole concept of social, and that's what's going to work best. Once you've built that base, now it's time to build your own brand beyond your network. And that's where it starts getting interesting. And that's where things like paid becomes really important. And we're going to talk a lot about paid strategies, but just to narrow it down in terms of the top things you need to think about, and we'll talk about each one more specifically. Think about, number one, your business objective. What are you trying to really do? And what I find is there's two things that most folks in the real estate market want to achieve. One, I want to build my personal brand. Or two, I want to sell a house, or I want to list a property. Those are the two main ones. Whether you choose one of the two objectives will change your entire strategy. So decide, and you can do both, and you should do both. So decide what your business objective is. Then you can start building it down from there. Things like, and we'll talk about this throughout this session, things like your campaign's objectives, your audience, who you want to target, your content strategy that's going to be working, what kind of budget, how much money you need. And from a budget perspective, and I don't know how much detail we're going to get here, but the way most agents think about it is, I have one or two ways to think about it. A, this is what I want to achieve, how much is it going to cost? Or B, this is how much money I got, what am I going to get out of it? And I would say it's usually the latter of what I hear. This is how much money I have $100, what do I do? That's usually what I hear. And the last part of it is, and sorry for the really long-winded answer, but we have a long time, so I figured why not.
An hour and a half.
We have an hour and a half, so I just figured I would just keep talking. If you do one thing, if you take one thing away from the session of everything that I talk about, I'm sure Davis has way more important things to talk about. But I'm again, remember what my title is. I'm focused on paid social. I help my clients make sure they get value. So I live and breathe return on investment. That is my entire life at Hootsuite. And
it's like music to their ears right now.
So everything is about, for me, I work with large commercial real estate agents as well. Colliers is one of my big clients. Everything is either return on ad spend or return on investment. That is my entire life. So here's what I can recommend. Everything you do, you are going to track everything. There's this thing called the Facebook pixel. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I'm going to talk about it in a bit. But a Facebook pixel, the one thing I want you to do when you go back home or you go back to your office, if you have a website, does anybody have a website? Raise your hand. Come on, that's it?
Higher. We can't see you because it's very bright up here.
Sorry, just so I'm clear, honestly, if you have your own website, raise your hand.
Frantically.
Oh, there we go. Okay. I was worried. Only 4 people have. If you have a website, and thank God you do, Put a Facebook pixel on it. I'll go into details as to why that's important. You're going to hear why that's important, but I'll give you one reason why that's so important. Imagine anybody who lands on your website, however they got there. I don't care how they got there. Would you agree that the person who lands on your website is somewhat interested in either you, your brand, buying some kind of real estate, or at least interested in real estate in some capacity? I think we can all agree with that. When you put that pixel on your website, you can track that person and you can target them. And you can find them and you can target them over and again. You can find people like that person. It is going to be a game changer to when you start. And the reason why you want to do that now, do it well before you even started on Facebook. I don't care when you start on Facebook, but you want to put that pixel today because it'll only capture data from the moment you place that pixel on. And that will be the one game changer you should take away from everything I say today. All right, that's much more.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks, Ryan. I want to revisit the concept of content, how we're creating this content. Now, typically really useful pieces of content will fall into 3 categories. They'll be inspirational, educational, or it'll be informative. And so in terms of those 3 different buckets, we look at why people would actually engage anyone in real estate. And it's typically because they can't buy and sell a house on their own. And so now we've recognized that this is a professional service, and this is something where you can provide really useful thought leadership and differentiate yourself with different information. And so what I like to do on my end is actually build a customer journey map, build that end-to-end customer experience of how they're going to go from not even considering purchasing property to, oh, maybe I'm in the market for this. What information should I find out? What am I doing? What am I thinking? What am I feeling? Then to where am I finding content? To then how am I choosing a specific agent? As well as then how do I evaluate that agent post-sale too? And so what would be really great is that if you could become that person on a social network to inform them about a need, to inform them about a market opportunity, to engage them, get them on your website, potentially retarget them, and get them back on your website later on after they forgot about your organization, and then eventually post-sale have them advocating on behalf of your organization. Whether that is an Instagram post where they've now tagged you specifically saying, hey, thanks for all the service in terms of finding me the perfect house, and building that vision, that's what's going to be really important. And so building that end-to-end customer experience and actually physically mapping it out from the awareness stage to the advocacy stage is going to be what really specifically indicates what pieces of content are going to be really interesting to each piece of the customer journey. Now, in order to elaborate on Ryan's point about advertising and where it plays into Facebook, within the last year, I actually did have to build a new brand on Facebook. And so I had a startup outside of this where I was selling clothing and men's technical apparel. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to use social advertising to really bolster that presence. What we looked at was actually building an authentic, a large following on Instagram, having that where people are becoming our brand advocates and using that as the advocacy stage of the customer journey. But I was doing a lot of the brand discovery on Facebook itself. The reason being is that we didn't want to play with the Nikes of the world and the Reeboks of the world on the search engines. Because if someone's already Googling things like men's technical apparel, I've already lost them to those who are going to be bidding highly on SEO and keywords. And the same thing could be said for real estate agents as well. You want to become that neutral kind of platform in terms of brand discovery. And so if someone sees your content on Facebook, it's not because they're in the market for real estate right away. It's because they're mindlessly checking Facebook every single morning, and boom, you've intercepted them with some form of insight that's valuable to them, and you can now nurture that lead and nurture that relationship a little bit further. And so what I said was that I'm going to invest heavily into newsfeed ads, and I began to also, as Ryan mentioned, test, optimize, and reiterate said advertisements for future use too. Now, my biggest goal was actually just getting them to purchase. But in terms of what this means for real estate, you're not going to sell a house entirely over e-commerce. Focus on getting at least some form of the next step in the customer journey. And so in your case, it might be getting an email. It might be getting an event attend. It could be a sign up or a lead form filled out. It could even just be getting them on your website so you can drop that Facebook pixel onto their browser and you can track their interaction history for when they are a prone target to retarget, and send another advertisement their way when there are certain triggers in life events that indicates that they are ready to purchase property. Whatever that is, it always comes down to what is your customer doing, thinking, and feeling, and how are they going from awareness, interest, to consideration, to then purchasing through, or at least becoming a lead within your realm of customer base, and then at the very end, advocating on behalf of your brand. The final piece I wanted to talk about was this cross-collaboration and this opportunity for partnerships too. And so one thing that we've identified at Hootsuite is that there are similar organizations that can be opportunities for cross-selling and co-selling. And so whether this is a mortgage broker who could help co-promote your content, share your page alongside their page, as well as co-create content with anyone who's like an interior designer, and they would be the ones to develop that content for you and share it to your audience, while then you repurpose some of their content for their audiences, more like complementary instead of competitors. This could be a large opportunity to reach new followings organically and very cheaply too. And so in summary, I really focus on, if I were to tie it down to one thing, Ryan said Facebook Pixel, I'm saying customer journey mapping. Fully understand how your customer is interacting with your brand and what's the most useful piece of content for every single stage alongside that customer's path to purchase.
Sounds like a lot of work.
It's a ton of work, but it's almost 5 steps.
I want to clarify a bit about like what the Facebook Pixel is and what we mean by retargeting. So the classic case is, let's say you go on Facebook and you click on this shoe ad. And then that shoe ad starts showing up 7 times a day on your feed and you can't figure out why. That is something like retargeting, because you clicked on that ad and now they feel like, oh, you're interested in these shoes, and you keep seeing these shoes until you eventually buy that pair of shoes. You're like, I can't escape you, I have to buy it. So that's the form of like retargeting, right? They know that, okay, you've been to the site, now we're going to keep showing you these ads and then bumping you through the customer journey. So that's essentially the story behind, okay, what we see Facebook doing for your potential leads. And I want to elaborate a bit more on the customer journey and the pixel and how we can use it in paid social ads, which is the next question, right? So I think it's definitely great to do retargeting. And also, I want you to elaborate more on that customer journey, because a lot of times, like even at my agency, I get real estate developers coming to me and saying, well, we just want leads. So they want to go from A to Z, right? Like, I want to sell this house right away. So let's tell the group here what's a bit more realistic. Like, is it just getting to the lead part and then after that it's more one-on-one? Like, what is the customer journey that you see for real estate? And what can paid social and organic do for that part of the customer journey?
Perfect. So for that part of the customer journey, I would definitely say get some interest or consideration in terms of a lead. And so hopefully that would be an email, or at least somewhere where you can talk to them off social media or on a more personal note. There's also this opportunity now within Facebook Messenger to have a click-to-message call to action. And so if you want to keep the entirety of that customer journey on the platform itself, you can actually convert them into direct messages, where now you have that captive one-to-one conversation where you can take that lead in any which way you want to. Another thing that I spoke about as well was this opportunity to test, optimize, and reiterate. And what I typically do when I'm building a customer journey map is that I align it to social KPIs. And what that means is that how many people have we reached in terms of awareness? How many likes have we gotten on content, click-throughs, and then the acquisition on the website? For the clothing company, that was a sell. But for you, it'll probably just be an email form, a lead form completion, or whatever it means to take them offline to that next stage of the customer journey. Now from this, it'll probably look like a funnel. You'll probably have 1 million impressions to generate maybe 50,000 people liking content, to generate 1,000 website click-throughs, that'll generate maybe 500 leads. But if you start to notice over time that the funnel starts to widen or shorten, you're gonna notice that this is opportunities to optimize that funnel. And so if people are landing on your website but they're not filling out the form, this isn't a problem specifically around the ad targeting. Maybe it's gonna be a problem around your landing page and how effective that is at converting people. Look to optimize that landing page, fix a few things about that to make it a little bit more intuitive, and in the future test this advertisement again and see if that changes that click-through to conversion rate ratio.
So what are some common best practices for optimizing a landing page?
I think I want to make it as intuitive as possible, as clear as possible as to what actually generated them to want to land on that page in particular. And so if it is a certain insight, follow up on that insight specifically on that landing page too, so that it's relevant to that advertisement or that organic piece of content that drove them there. And then have it very simple and easy to convert to the next stage too. And so here's the insight as to why you're here. Here's a place for additional or a little bit more business value that we can give to you, or that's ways to find a personal consultation, opportunities to list a property, and then here's that call to action, as well as this opportunity to fill out specific more information around your individual. And so that could be just an email form or another place for you to contact them.
I think what would be helpful is to maybe tie this idea of a pixel to the idea of the conversion funnel, because we're using a lot of tech jargon. I just want to level set for a second. When I talked about content and thought leadership, I think we can all understand that we've all been prone to maybe read an article that says, click here to read about 8 tips on how to find an agent or the biggest buying mistakes. So what was the point of that to begin with? Why did I share that content with anybody? Well, in one, I want to show that I'm a great thought leader, I'm sharing great content. That's all fine and good, but I'll give you the bigger reason. When a user clicks on your Facebook post or your Facebook ad, or Instagram post and an Instagram ad, and goes to read that content, they're going to read that content on your website. When they landed on your website, that Facebook pixel, it's a little piece of code that's landing in the background, pings off, and now denotes that this person landed on my website. So now I could then take these people that I've tracked, and I can put them into a CRM or into essentially, as Davis was talking about, like a lead funnel. This is now a potential lead. You don't know who this person is. We can't find them exactly. Again, this is all data in the background. But this person now becomes a potential lead who someone is interested in what you have to say. And that is the critical first step that I think is often lost, where we publish all types of content, but we don't track them down, we don't follow them down that conversion funnel. So I'll just take you to the next step. So first, someone clicks on it, they read my article, that's great, I've now tracked them. Now imagine, to Davis's point, this is 1,000 people who do this. These are 1,000 people who potentially might be interested in hiring you as an agent, or at least interested in what you have to say. You could then take those people, you build an audience in Facebook, and you now target them with an ad that might say, a particular listing, or showing up to an event, or hey, maybe showing up to an open house. This is how that conversion funnel works, starting at the very, very top with content. Does that make sense?
So I think to elaborate a bit more on building an audience using your Facebook pixel, what that means is within the Facebook ad platform, you can actually go into the back end and select, for example, everybody who's visited my website in the last 30 days. So you can build an audience using that because the pixel is tracking all that traffic. So you could have different windows of time, right? Let's say it's, everybody within the past 7 days, because that's when I put up my new listing, right? Or anybody who's been there for the past 1 day because I just did an open house and I want to make sure that I'm converting those people or following up with those people. So that's what Ryan means when he says build an audience using traffic from your pixel.
Yeah, we'll get. I think we'll talk a little bit about audiences and what have you.
Yes.
And dig into that a little bit as well.
Yes. So follow up to digging a bit more into the paid social side of things. So when you're starting a paid social campaign, what are some key factors to consider? Like you mentioned, from audience to even choosing whether a lifetime budget or an ad set budget. I don't want to get too technical, but what are some key things that the audience should be thinking about? Keeping in mind most of the audience here, you guys are either sole proprietors or real estate teams. Anybody that does not fall into that category? Yes.
Yeah.
And what do you do?
We work for an agency that works with home builders.
Okay.
So we manage their social accounts.
I see. Okay, so still relevant.
I work with a ton of those agencies that. So I work with. I can think of about 6 or 7 agencies that manage about 500 to 5,000 different agents' accounts. Yeah.
Yeah. So what kind of factors and elements should they be considering before even jumping into the platform?
Well, first off, we touched on this. I just want to make sure we just really make sure we're all on the same page as to why we would consider running an ad to begin with, because isn't Facebook free? So ask Zuckerberg that. We keep on talking, we keep on throwing this word of organic reach. I just want to put perspective just to make sure we all understand what we're talking about. Back in the day, again, I'm going back in the olden day, whatever you posted on Facebook, everybody saw. It was the greatest days ever. Those days didn't last very long. Then Zuckerberg realized he needed to pay all his staff, so he realized he needed to make money. So essentially the way it worked is he basically built an algorithm. And an algorithm essentially determines what you are going to see when you land on Facebook. Facebook decides what you're going to see. Okay, so Facebook decides what your experience is going to be every second of every minute of every day you land on Facebook and Instagram, for that matter. And that is the algorithm. Now what happened to us is essentially they moved this algorithm down to determine how much reach you get from an organic perspective. How many of your followers are actually going to see any of your individual pieces of content? And can anybody guess, you guys probably know because you're an agency, so I'm not asking you guys. Anybody guess what percentage do you think organic reach is? Throw a number out.
0.5.
0.5, okay. So you're saying that if you have 100 followers, only 0.5% of them are actually going to see anything you post.
So half a person.
Half a person. Okay, no, that's good. That's good. Anybody else? Nobody has any idea? 10%? 20%? What else? 2%. 2%? Okay. So you in the front row. Sir, what's your name? Richard. Richard's the closest. Yeah, pretty crazy.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
If, like I want to incorporate everything that you said just now, do you have an account manager that I can do it? Because I don't have time to do it all of that.
Yes, we can. Or those guys have an agency. You can hire these guys over there.
I'm not big enough to go for Florence. My other question, quick question, is that how do I leverage Google Guides? I have like 13 million hits into something that I can channel off to some of these channels that you mentioned.
Google Guides.
Yeah. Like I love to eat, and so I go out to eat like almost every day, and I take pictures. So I have like 13 million people hitting on my picture, and real estate as well.
Okay.
So how do I monetize that?
Okay, I'll get to that. Let me just finish the reach challenge, and then I'll touch on. You're asking essentially. You're asking about retargeting, and yes, you can do it.
Yeah,
It's a little.
I
It's
messaged Florence with my.
yeah, it's a little technical. I'll try to tell you how to do it. And it's the one thing that everybody wants to know. How do I go from Google to Facebook? That's what everybody asks me.
Can you just maybe I can just talk to one of the account managers?
I'll tell you how you do it. It's really easy. No, it's not really easy. But just to sum up the organic reach challenge. Organic reach, the number of the organic reach changes, and it's different by brand, by brand, by brand, by brand. And the reason for that is Facebook favors brands and content that people engage in. Not surprisingly, it's all about a positive user experience, right? So on average, I would say it's around 1%. So now you're thinking, geez, this guy just told me to find followers and fans, and now he's telling me I can only reach 1% of them. The way to make that 1% a little bit higher, maybe you can go to 2 or 3%, is having really good content that people engage in. Or the other way is, to Florence's point, paid advertising. You defeat the algorithm 100 times over, and it doesn't cost $1 million to be able to have to run paid advertising. I have clients, I work with real estate agents that spend $10 a campaign, $20, $100 a campaign. However, what I will tell you though, if you're going to spend a small amount of money, you have to be good at what you're doing. Otherwise, you're kind of throwing it away. So I'll touch on let me get back to your Google component. I'll talk about that when we talk about audiences, because it's interesting at how to connect Google and Facebook. It's the holy grail if you can get there, and I'll help you get there. So I just want to touch on Florence's point in terms of where do you start? And this is what I work on with a lot of clients. I don't have a ton of money. I'm not a Coca-Cola. I'm not sitting on $1 million. Can I even run a Facebook campaign for $100? Is that even? Do you think you can? You absolutely can. So this is where you start, and it kind of goes back to my original point. Often, most agents that I deal with have no idea how much to spend. So they ask me, how much do I need to run an ad campaign? Now, I'll tell you, it very much depends on, the number one thing it depends on is the size of your potential audience, of how many people you want to talk to. Now you're going to I want to talk to as many as I can. You don't want to talk to as many as you can, because then you're lessening your reach. So let me put this into perspective. Some of the most important things you need to consider when you first want to launch an ad campaign, we talked about tracking in pixels. That's great. Get that code up on your website. Do it today, tomorrow. Trust me, it'll help you in the long run. Budget, you need to figure that part out. I can help you there. The other things you need to think of as I tied on is audiences. I'm a really big fan of trying to figure out audience and targeting. And truthfully, if you ask me what the number one benefit is of advertising on Facebook or Instagram, it's targeting. It's the ability to find the people in a haystack. How do you know, of all the people that are on Facebook at any one time, and globally there's 2 billion people, how do I find the person who's interested in buying a home at that minute that I happen to post it? Like, geez, what are the chances of that? Well, the great thing about Facebook and Instagram, and by the way, when we talk about advertising, Facebook and Instagram uses the same advertising platform. Instagram is just a placement for Facebook. So they work exactly the same in terms of launching a campaign. So everything I'm telling you, for the most part, that works on Facebook also works on Instagram. Okay? So when you think about audiences and you think about targeting, and it's the holy grail of why it's so powerful to be on social, of all social. And the reason for that is we know, if anybody followed Cambridge Analytica and everything, the reality is that the Facebooks of the world know everything about you, whether you like it or not. Everything you click on, everything you like, everything you share, all of your friends, and literally everything you do on Facebook and Instagram is tracked and held as a profile. You are a profile to Facebook. You're not a person, you're a profile, okay? So what you want to do is find the people that have the highest likelihood in engaging your content or clicking on your ad or going to that open house or finding out more about that listing or your own personal brand. And so they have a number of different ways you can find people based on what people are interested in, based on that profile. And the profile is broken out like this. You have things like demographics, interests, behaviors, age, geolocation, all of that, and what you do off of Facebook. Remember that pixel? What you do off of it. All of this creates a profile. And you have the ability to find the people who are most interested in what you have to say. And if you're smart about it and you really do your research and figure out all the targeting parameters are available, that's how you can win on Facebook. What I see, and my agent did this, so I'm working with my agent. She's going to be selling my home. My home's going up for sale at the end of this month. I'm packing like madness right now. And so, and I looked at her ad campaigns, and I laughed because when she does it, she buys it like any other media. I want to target 18 to 49-year-olds, males and females, in this radius. And I run an ad campaign. And I said to her, what are the chances of all the people in my area that you're going to, she says, well, I don't know, I want to spread my net as wide as I can. I said, how much money are you spending? She says, $150. So that is probably one of the worst ways of running an ad campaign because Facebook offers so much more. I don't know if you guys realize this, but if you go on Facebook and you put in interest, you can target people who are actively interested in real estate at that time. And how does Facebook know? Well, I'm either part of a real estate group that I've engaged in, I might follow some other real estate agents. Facebook knows this information, so use it to your advantage. And that's the most effective way to start a campaign on Facebook, and that's what you should spend the most amount of your time trying to figure out to making sure that your content reaches the right people at the right time.
Just to elaborate on Ryan's last point, there's even like some level of granularity of it, specifically towards everyone in this room. And so I was actually looking at some of the real estate targeting parameters. There's 3 categories. There's first-time home buyers, there's investment property seekers, as well as there are tenants. And so this is a really quick opportunity to really target your advertisements based off of who's in the market for what in particular. And don't be afraid as well to have multiple different copies of advertisements running at once. The reason for this being is that you really want to curate that content, that copy, that call to action, that specific imagery that you're using to the audience that you're targeting to. And so don't worry about posting your new listings every single week and then just targeting a different audience every single time. You really want to be as granular and as specific as possible, especially if you're putting dollars behind this too. The other thing you want to look at in particular would be your call to action. Or sorry, your call to action in terms of like what this is going to drive them towards. So I keep coming back to this idea of what's the end conversion that you want to get from this individual. Is it for them to sign up for an event by having that as the option for them to click into on Facebook? Is it for them to message you directly or go to your website and fill out a form? And this will actually tie really well into the type of media buy that they purchase from Facebook too. And so Ryan's example, the real estate agent was casting their net as wide as possible. They're probably doing something that Facebook calls a cost per mil or cost per 1,000 impressions advertisement. So you can actually really effectively get around 1,000 people for around $9 Canadian. Really cheap and effective way to reach a large audience, but we don't really, even if you are targeting them, what you're purchasing is just for them to see that content. If you want to get a little bit more of a guarantee, it's going to be a little bit more expensive, but there's an option for them to land on your website, and that's called cost per click. There's also what we call cost per acquisition, and that's for them to fill out something specific like a lead form. So for them to go to your website, the Facebook pixel will track this and now enable you to have that media buy, but for them to actually become a lead to your organization. But what's really interesting about this too is that we now have to come back to this ask of what is your budget overall and how much do we want to spend on this. And what I like to look at is how much is a lead worth to everyone in this room. And so if you were to get 10 people who have signed up as leads and 5 of them will show up to an open house, figure out what that means in terms of propensity to convert, to actually become a customer, and how much you would actually pay for that lead. Because if your cost per acquisition and you're paying $10 for one person to fill out a form, and really your only return on investment is $2, it's not an advertisement you want to run. It's not one you want to run in the future either. And so you need to either consider other media buys outside of that format, or you want to figure out how you're going to tweak your ad to get your cost per acquisition cost down. And so that's the way I would approach this, is looking at the end result, the quantifiable value in terms of how do you build return on ad spend, like Ryan mentioned, or at least social return on investment, working backwards into how much you would pay for that ad spend, setting those parameters within Facebook, and then finally as well saying, who is my audience that I want to target, and get very granular with both demographic and psychographic information, such as am I in the market for real estate? The other thing I wanted to look at as well was what are the really important ones for granularity of targeting. I'm going to state the obvious here, but if you're selling Toronto real estate, every single time make sure that your market is at least specifically targeting people within the Toronto or greater Toronto area. Other things as well would be who are the demographics of people who have previously purchased property from you in particular. Figure out, what do they like to do, what do they like to interact with on social media, what's their actual profile itself, and use that to build your targeting parameters. Because that's actually what's going to build that customer profile, which will inform that customer journey, and give you a little bit more insight into the ad targeting parameters that you want to set within Facebook that's going to resonate with a specific audience that's specific to you as a real estate agent. It's going to be different from your competition because this is content that you created based off of that personal brand that you've built on your social networks too.
Just to add to that, there's a free tool. It's called Facebook Audience Insights. It's connected to your business page. And as soon as you start doing stuff, publishing content, getting fans, followers, likes, go into Facebook Insights. And then you'll get a better sense as to who are these people? You think you know who your perfect demographic is. But you're going to find out more specifically when you realize what are the type of people on social that's interested in my content. It might be a little bit different than your typical client base. Maybe it's more aligned to how you're publishing content, when you're publishing it, but really dig into those insights to figure out, so who am I going after and who really cares about what I have to say? And that will help you refine your strategy significantly. And you could do lots of ways of testing different audiences and different creative, and you're going to get all of these insights off of that Facebook Audience Insights tool.
Further to your point, Ryan, as well, this is available on Instagram, specifically if you enable an Instagram business page. So all you need for an Instagram business page is to connect that to a Facebook page as well as fill out some information on the profile itself, such as a call to action button. And so you can't just have just the following button on your page. You also have this opportunity to email you or call you. And why this is important is because once you do have that Instagram business page, you start to see demographic information on people who are following you too. And so which countries are they from? Are they male or female? A little bit of light age demographics too. And this will give you some insight as to how you want to target your advertisements.
So I actually have a fun case study that we did that speaks a bit to the granularity of the targeting options on Facebook and Instagram. So recently, my agency helped a townhouse project market to first-time home buyers. So of course, you want to target the people who are in the market. You mentioned there were 3 categories, like investor.
Yeah, if you've already purchased property,
yes.
If you're a first-time home buyer,
yes.
Or if you're a renter. Those are the 3 real estate-specific targeting parameters.
Yes. So there are other granular components as well. And what we looked at was actually if they were recently engaged, because that's usually when they become first-time home buyers, right? Mm-hmm. They're getting married, or when it's a young family. So if they are newlyweds with a young child, right? They're looking for more room. So you can target recent life events like that as well. So it really does get quite granular with Facebook. So you can also look at that by looking at the product, right? Townhomes, usually it's a first-time home buyer that's growing family. And there's also downsizer products. So you may target for recent events like retiring, right? So also look at recent events in addition to the demographics and interests that you can target on Facebook, I think. And then also want to expand on your points about cost per click and cost per acquisition. So we think of a website. Let's say you have a project website. Isaac has King's Landing website or Concord Canada House website. So when somebody lands on your page, Facebook counts that as a cost per click because they actually went to your website. But the cost per acquisition, that little pixel code, we usually code it as an event. So something happens on your website, like they filled in a form and they landed on your thank you page. So when somebody lands there, then Facebook counts it as, oh, that is an acquisition because that's your lead generated. So that's what we mean by the cost per acquisition cost, just to elaborate a little bit more on that in some terminology relevant to the real estate audience here.
One thing that should be, we have to bring up here because you guys are going to realize this really fast. As of about 6-9 months ago, Facebook made a pretty significant change to the real estate industry on Facebook. Does anybody know what the big change was?
There was some housing regulations on there.
Yes.
That you had to opt into.
Right.
Yes.
So what you guys obviously were, not to berate on the whole Cambridge Analytica scandal, but obviously Facebook went through some pretty bad press around privacy. Around fake news, privacy. Is this news to anybody? You guys all familiar with what I'm talking about here? Okay. Stock took a massive hit. Okay. So because of that, Facebook had to make some pretty significant changes around how they treated the user experience, particularly around discrimination and privacy. Because again, as I said, Facebook knows literally everything about you. So one of the first things they did, well, they did a number of different things to change privacy, including changing the algorithm. They created the way that certain organizations are able to target, for good and for bad. And so what they did is it's called special ad categories. And it's for, and it puts restrictions on businesses like credit unions, looking for, including housing, employment. So those are the three ones. I think there's others. So housing, anybody involved in housing, all of us here, it puts restrictions on the type of targeting you can do. And the restrictions are, they restrict you against being able to target people by age. There's a caveat to this, so hold on. I'll tell you how to get around this in a second. They restrict you on age. They restrict you on gender. They restrict you on zip code. And anything that might prove to be discriminatory based on your multicultural affinity. So certain behaviors and certain interests. And again, all of this is to combat the potential challenge around discrimination. So now remember, this restriction is only for ads targeted for specific listings. It's only for ads trying to sell housing, okay? What it doesn't count for are ads around thought leadership. So if you run an ad driving to a white paper or a blog talking about the 5 best tips for buyers and sellers, it's open game, right? Only when you're actually selling. So back to the retargeting piece, a really great way around this, and I educate all of my clients on this is how you get around it. You run an ad campaign with all the targeting parameters to your amazing piece of content that people are interested in. They land on your page, you've pixeled them so you know who they are. Now because we already know who they are, we can build an audience, as Florence was saying, we can build an audience in Facebook, and we can retarget that person with a listing. So we don't have to worry about the restrictions. We already got the person, we already know who they are. Okay? That's a really good way around it, but just be cognizant that there are these restrictions on real estate specific to selling homes on the platform.
Awesome. So some really good pointers here, and I do want to move us into the Instagram component, but some key points to take away from this discussion is that, one, make sure you install that Facebook pixel for all of you who have a have a website, right? So that you're tracking all the leads coming in. And the second is really consider how your advertising takes your prospective lead / customer through the customer journey, right? Like what can it realistically do for you? Like if you probably won't sell a home through a Facebook ad. That's still like you need to close that deal yourself, okay? So what realistically can it do as part of your customer journey that your clients are going through? So moving more into Instagram right now, if some of these in the audience, like they do not have an Instagram business page, so how would they get started building one? Like where do they start if it's organic feed that we're looking at?
Perfect, yeah. So for the Instagram business page, the first thing you need is to have it connected to a Facebook business page, which is connected to a Facebook profile. And so even if you created a dummy Facebook page, at least this is something for Instagram to verify and latch onto. Instagram business pages, they're trying to push for as many different pages as possible. I see a lot of my friends' personal accounts just have those business calls to action, which means that they are running an Instagram business page as well, and they're doing it probably for the insights, just for fun. But what's interesting about this is that the most important part about an Instagram business page is that it's really easy for them to get in contact with you via the channel that you think is most appropriate for you. And so if you're an email person, it'll put your email as a call to action. It could be a call person, it could be a website. Whatever way you want to funnel your customers, Instagram will recommend that call to action directly on your profile. And so that's the first thing you want to do. They will ask for a little bit more information. Things like they might ask for a full profile completion. So you don't just need a handle, but you need like a name behind that as well as whatever website that you want to attach it to. But just specifically list all of the different things in the Instagram business page caveats, and you'll unleash a lot more functionality with the platform itself. And finally, one of my favorite things with that page too, like I mentioned in the last question, is the insights behind it. So you can see how many people have visited your page right within the platform. You can see profile engagement. You can now see some demographic information from these individuals. And most importantly, you can begin to run Instagram advertisements too. The other thing you can look at from a user functionality basis is that I know most people in this room are probably on their phones all day because they're on the go. But if you ever do want to sit down, there's a lot more desktop functionality as an Instagram business page compared to a personal page. And so Instagram will also beta test new features with their business pages first. So things like, I noticed that I couldn't direct message off of my personal page on desktop, but Ryan could. There's other options as well in terms of how you actually publish through others' third-party social networks too. So we're here with Hootsuite. We noticed that if you're going to publish through any third-party social publisher, you can't do it from a personal page. It has to be a business page. And so there's a lot more functionality. It's cheap to do. It's very free. It's very convenient and easy if you just connect it to a personal page, or sorry, a page on Facebook, as well as if you fill out that call to action of whether it's an email or a call button.
I think you covered it all.
So let's say organically I'm trying to start a new Instagram business account. And in terms of the different types of contents I could be creating, there's static posts, there's IG stories, there's IGTV, and I would let's just assume we're starting on a blank slate here. So let's educate the audience on those types of contents they could be creating and what you would recommend, knowing that they are mostly of a realtor background.
Yeah, so, and as I mentioned before, again, remember, when you're creating content, I would think about it both on the Facebook side and Instagram. Again, I wouldn't necessarily think it one versus the other. The other thing I would recommend when you think about content, we'll go into specifics in a second, don't assume you know it all, because guess what? You don't. So test different types of content, test different types of formats, and allow the users to tell you what works. You can track everything. Think of Facebook and Instagram as the largest focus group that's ever existed in history. Use that to your advantage. So that I'm going to just caveat everything. The advice we give you, take it with a grain of salt. You need to test what works for you. Okay, so in terms, to answer your specific question in terms of what type of content or formats work, you mentioned Instagram stories. I'm a big fan of Instagram stories. And the reason is, there's a lot of reasons. One, you'll do really well from an algorithm perspective because Instagram favors the stories. They're really trying to push them. Gives you a much bigger screen format to use. It's more engaging, so definitely test out Instagram stories. Takes a little bit more time and energy in terms of producing the content, but remember, not everything has to look so perfect and polished. In fact, I follow a particular agent was a friend of mine, and she's posting all kinds of stuff. It's just interesting to see even what you guys have to go through when you're selling a house. And she was even posting the other day, she was in her car. I can't believe this happens. She's in her car, and she's doing an Instagram story of what it was like of all the different agents, and there must have been about 10 of them sitting outside their car waiting to see if their bid got accepted. And she's like, this is what I go through. It's just interesting to see, you know, the day in a life of an agent. So anything in that regard is really interesting for people like us who don't live and breathe your everyday. Other side, when we think about basic formats, don't forget the basic stuff. So a simple, on Instagram, it has to be an ad. So here's something interesting. You probably have noticed this. You can't post a link in an organic Instagram post.
Why? I've had this question so many times. Why? Why do they restrict that?
What do you think?
They want to keep everybody in platform.
Yeah.
Because that's a reporting metric for them to
Exactly.
investors.
So my guess is that's going to go away eventually. It used to be that way on Facebook, and then they pulled. So what happens is to Florence's point, it benefits Instagram to have people stay on the platform, because as soon as you have a link, when I click out to that, there's a good chance I'm not coming back.
Yeah.
So it's that whole idea is totally in Instagram's favor, not for us. So in Instagram, you can't post a link in an organic post, but you can post a link in a paid post, in a paid advertisement. If you've ever seen them, I'm sure you have, because everybody raised their hands, they're on. When you see that big image at the bottom, when you scroll over it, you can click and you can go somewhere. Really, really critical to get them to go to any kind of piece. So don't forget that. On Facebook, though, it doesn't matter if it's organic or paid. Video, I don't want to belabor this point, but video by far is the number one, I would say, overall in-feed placement that works the best. Both Facebook and Instagram both favor video. And when I say favor, that means that the algorithm will put you ahead of others that are not running video. Why? Because it keeps people on the platform longer, and it's a better user experience. One thing I'll say about video, this could be a whole separate session on video, which I've done a whole hour session just on video, but just a couple tips and tricks on video. One, the best trick I usually give people is think about when people watch it, the sound is off. So create video assuming people are not hearing anything. Most people watch it with sound off, believe it or not, okay? Because sound on you have to actually turn the sound on. So if it requires some kind of sound or verbiage in the background, use subtitles. People are much more likely to read those, okay? When you're standing in line at Starbucks, I don't want to play it. I don't want to have everybody hear what I'm watching, okay? Think about that type of thing. Also, shorter is typically better when it comes to video. As much as you think people are going to sit in the Starbucks line for 10 minutes watching your video, probably not. So make it shorter and make the most impactful part of your video the first 5 seconds. It's tough to do, but think about it. Okay, that's what I'll talk about on the video side. Images work really well. Obviously, Instagram is an image-based platform. It started that way. The brighter, the more I would say eye-catching, but we talk about it as thumb-stopping. Make sure you can grab people's attention. Do something different. So we seem to be a society that's in love with stock images. Our company, I hate to say this, but is the worst for it. And you know that stock image that every software company uses of the wooden table with the coffee mug, it's over top on the MacBook? We use it.
Instagram.
What's that?
It's very Instagram.
It's very Instagrammable, but we see it so much now. Again, this is a personal opinion. We see it. I almost feel that people scroll by it. Try to do something a little bit unique and different, something that's more related to your brand when it comes to content.
In real estate, for photos, we're not in love with that photo in particular, but we are very much in love with renderings, right, Isaac? So we love our renderings, and what I would suggest is when we actually run a lot of different real estate developer and project feeds at my agency, and what we do is we test all the different photos. We test it in the ad creatives, we test it in the organic, and what I can tell you is architectural photos. So if you're taking a photo of a building and it's an architectural photo, those ones do well. Don't try to do a wide angle shot that's horizontal, because one, that takes up not a lot of real estate as you're scrolling through, and it's not thumb stopping. Right? And because it's the same rendering and every other realtor is using it, nobody's going to stop for that either. Right? So maybe you want to go into the show suite and take some tighter shots, because those ones also perform much better on Instagram as well. Okay, so just some photo tips.
Let me ask you a question, because you've obviously done this a lot. I see a lot of virtual walkthroughs.
Yes. So do it on IG stories.
What works better? I'm asking you now. I'm flipping the hotspot. What works better, virtual walkthroughs or images?
I would say the way we've done it is a mixture of both. Because when organic reaches down on static posts, so what we do is we actually, let's say I post a static post onto the feed. I then share that post onto stories and say, hey, we posted something new on this organic feed, go check it out. But we then also supplement it with an expanded set of stories that takes them through the show suite. So your static copy could be, oh, we're launching this new project this week, and actually you can check out the full virtual walkthrough in the IG stories, or even in IGTV if it's longer than a minute, because the duration for your IG stories is 10 seconds, right? So you might want to do a pan of the balcony view, panoramic views from this balcony, less than 10 seconds. Great, I can see it, I experience it. Or massive pool, So you're showing your amenities now, also less than 10 seconds. So all those things that you can do in a more authentic and engaging way when you're showcasing a new project or even a listing that you're marketing.
Yeah, we keep on mentioning the word testing. I just want to make sure everybody understands what we're talking about. What I mean, I'm assuming we're talking about the same thing, but when you run an ad campaign, within an individual ad campaign, same objective, same budget, same everything, within that ad campaign, the system allows you to test different images, or different videos, or different headlines, or different calls to actions, even different URLs. It allows you to test them all within the same campaigns, the same budget, same everything. I recommend test, 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 and then learn for yourself. While Florence and I both have our opinions in terms of what works and what doesn't, see what works for your client base. You'll find out really quickly what works. And then what's most interesting is that the algorithm, the ads algorithm, will select what's best based on what people are engaging with. So use that to your advantage.
Yeah, that's totally correct in that every project is slightly different. So for one project, we may find that lifestyle photos with a baby works best versus another one where an interior shot with someone sitting on the sofa works best. But you are able to test, like even from a very simple setup, you could just throw 6 images in there. Yeah. And then within 2-3 days on like a $50 budget, you can probably tell which photo is driving the best and the lowest click-through rate. Right? So I mean click-through cost per click. Yeah.
You know, and then take that information while it's great for your ad campaign, and great, I did an awesome ad campaign and this one worked. Take that information and use that for the rest of your marketing. If I know that this image drove so much better engagement than all my other ones, and I'm creating a direct mail piece, or I want to have one header image on my landing page, your users just told you which ones to use.
Yeah.
So you can use this information more than just within social. You can use it well beyond social in the confines of your overall marketing strategy.
Yeah, so now that we know we can pay to get eyeballs on our ads, but let's bring it back to, for organic reach on Instagram. So what we've noticed for real estate developers, various accounts that we run, is over the past, say, 6 months, we've seen organic engagement and reach fall by 50%. And it's 50% and then another 50%. So how would you advise your clients on combating that? Because it's quickly moving in that direction where we're going to get to 1% or 0.5% reach very soon.
Well, as per your previous point as well, I think Instagram Stories is great for this because Instagram Stories, by the time you scroll to the end of it, you will actually see all the accounts that you followed who have posted their stories as opposed to the feed where you might not see everyone's content. And so this is a great opportunity, like you mentioned, to take that content format, where if you do ever post a feed piece of content, to then repost that on your story, give the little blurb on the insight, and then get more information on the actual context or the comment of it itself as well. Another big opportunity as well that you mentioned was Instagram Live, because Instagram Live is almost the opposite of that. Whenever somebody goes live on my Instagram or my Facebook page, usually I get a push notification, which means now you're encouraging more people to then join that conversation. You won't have the same number of viewers by any means. You might have 1,000 followers and 6 people join you for Instagram Live. But if 6 people are joining you for a virtual walkthrough of a property, that's a highly engaged audience for someone who's probably considering at least becoming a lead for that property itself too. And so consider different formats than just looking at what Instagram is declining for organic reach of that main feed content as well. The other thing we can look at too is create some form of collaborative feed where your entire profile itself has the same form of branding. Because if someone does see that one post that you do post after they haven't seen 4, and they click into your profile, it's actually really unique if they see the same sorts of shots, or at least the same sort of artistic design, coloring, styling, and branding throughout the entire feed itself with some form of brand consistency. The idea here is that at least now you've gotten them to land on your Instagram page, scroll through, and try to find out more information. And so maybe they saw one shot of a very aesthetic home that, they said that we're not in the market to buy in that area in particular, but it's a really cool shot. Let's see what else this realtor is posting. And then they land on your page. This is a higher propensity for them to engage with different pieces of content, maybe a more realistic listing within their budget feasibility or within their location feasibility that will allow them to purchase as well. And so consider that piece as well, whether it's Instagram Stories and reposting your content, Instagram Live, leveraging those push notifications in your favor, or finally creating a consistent brand on your feed content so that when people do click onto your profile, it's all consistent for them to interact with. Any thoughts, Ron?
My big one is, I think I'm jumping ahead to your next. Can we talk about influencers? Can we do that? Can we do that now?
Yeah, you can do it.
Well, no, because that to me, I mean, this is all great, and we talk about, content is king and great content, and it's easy for me to sit up here and say, great content. You're like, what the hell's great content? So sometimes you have to think beyond yourself and think about, who do I know that already has a big follower base? And big followers make a difference to organic reach, big time. If you have lots and lots of followers, you're more than likely to reach more people. It just is what it is. So it comes to the world of influencer marketing. And I have a sort of a love-hate relationship with influencers. Do you guys know, show of hands, when I say the term influencer marketing, who knows what I'm talking about? Okay. What's influencer marketing?
Putting me on the spot.
Yeah. Well, you put me, I'm going to.
You tie into the influencer follower. Is that somehow you connect together?
Okay, yeah, we're good. Yeah. So an influencer is someone who has influence, someone that has, it's not just about having a lot of followers. Remember when I said anyone can buy followers. You can buy 100,000 followers for like $20. That doesn't necessarily mean they're of influence. A person of influence gets a lot of engagement. A person of influence is someone you can recognize potentially. So think about it in your world. So, and I follow a bunch of influencers, and their influencers can go all the way up to, the Jay-Z's of the world, which is obviously not in our business, but obviously, he's got Beats headphones, and Dr. Dre has Beats headphones. These guys are big influencers because they're celebrities. But you can take this way, way down several notches without having to pay the millions of dollars, and you can work with people who have created great content, and they've created a great follower base because they've created great content that people care about. Because we go back to content so much, sometimes it's important to maybe reach out to your network. And so some examples, and I'm sure Davis has some good examples as well, but one influencer, because again, as I said, I'm in the real estate market right now, is my wife and I are really thinking about designing our new house, right? So there's lots and lots of influencers, designers, who've created amazing spaces. Amazing spaces. So my neighbor happens to be an influencer, and she works with a number of brands, and they redid her house. And her house happens to be the same style as our house, and her house looks so much better than our house. But it's amazing that I saw it, and I watched it on Instagram, and sure enough, I commented, and I asked her, I'm like, who did this for you? What is that? What color are you using on the wall? What couch is that? This is exactly the whole point of it. So if you think about it, it's a way to get people engaged in a property, in a type of area they have, a place they live, design. It all kind of feeds up into creating that inspiration, creating content that's going to get people to engage. And if you work with these influencers, what's great about it, going back to targeting, is now once someone engages in a piece of content that you've worked on, now you can target that person. They are now in your lead funnel because they've engaged in content, and it's not even your own. Now, there's lots of ways to work with influencers. Some of them are more expensive than others. But again, look at it as a content play. And don't just look at the number of followers they have. Look at the type of engagement they get. Look at who is engaging with them as well, and that kind of thing. This might be an easy way to sort of jump into the game and maybe take thoughts and feedback from an influencer that's already creating great content.
So some of the ways like relevant to real estate or realtors, a lot of times when you have a listing, they stage the home. Right? So there is a great opportunity here to work with, say, some of the fabulous designers, especially interior designers. If you bring in somebody with, say, 20,000 followers and they're an interior designer and have them stage it, and then you cross promo on your stories or your static content and you tag them, and then they're incentivized to share your content, then instantly you tap into their 20,000 followers, right? Another way I've actually seen real estate developers do it is they've brought in those interior designers to brand their show suites.
That's cool.
Right? So by doing that, they're generating content that, again, taps into more of the Instagram follower base.
Yeah.
And besides interior designers, I know for Concord out in Vancouver, back in the day, we brokered some deals for them to brand an entire show suite to be Gucci.
Oh my
right?
God.
So to do something like that, it's very different, but you're instantly tapping into the other brand's power, right? So influencer, yes, they have influence, but it's also because they've built a strong enough brand and a personal brand to have that influence, right? So what are they good for? Can they brand your interior design? Can they brand an entire building, right? So at that single realtor level, you can engage a 20K influencer. At that bigger real estate developer level, you can engage other brands that may bring a certain element, like for example, fashion, or the more prestigious premium brand feel associations that you may want to brand your building with, because a building is a building until we put some sort of a branding association behind it, and you can draw in those positive associations through influencer marketing.
100%.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, I think you pretty much hit everything on the influencer piece. I just want to bring this back to, why are people actually on Instagram itself as opposed to different social networks? Ryan talked a lot about like the insight you could deliver through Facebook. So things like 5 things you need to know when you're purchasing your second home, or some form of insight like that that'll incentivize you to click through. That's more of thought leadership. Instagram's main purpose, it's almost like the very vain purpose that a lot of people are on the application itself. They like to build a vision. They like to show their ideal lifestyle, the great life they're living. They're posting their personal highlight reel. It's okay to use your content and work with influencers as such too. Build the vision of what living in that idealistic neighborhood with that beautiful home is like. Work with those interior designers and talk about how it can be accessible in terms of when they get more engaged with your content in the caption itself. But in the imagery, make sure it is kind of partnered with that influencer in terms of building that aspirational lifestyle that you want your followers to appeal towards.
Awesome. So I think right now we are at Q&A time. 1.5 hours passed by so quickly, right?
Flies by.
It's like flew by.
Actually, can I answer his question now?
Yes, you
I feel bad
can.
that I
Google the
didn't.
Made
Facebook.
him wait
Google
all
the
day.
Facebook. How do we do that?
Okay, so I did a webinar a few months ago. I've been asked to do this for a while. I did a webinar on how to connect Facebook and Google. It was the biggest webinar we've ever done. It was insane. And so I didn't realize that many people are interested in to know how to do it. So I'm going to tell you right now how to do it. You ready? Pay attention. It's really complicated. It is actually, it's going to be hard for me to tell you all the details, particularly because you're new to this. And just so you know, it is an advanced technique to do this. So I'm not going to give you all the details. Record me, watch my webinar. Get them down.
He's paying attention.
So let me put this into perspective. We all know, please tell me we all know Google, right? Now the first thing most people do when they're thinking about buying anything, real estate or beyond, is they go on Google and they search, right? And they search for something. Now, what are the chances that you search for something and you immediately bought? On the real estate market, probably next to 0. But what that does show me is that there's a high level of intent with that person. So remember that Google is really good at finding intent. Facebook and Instagram are really good from a targeting perspective. So I now know that person who typed in, I don't know, what would they type in? What if you're looking? What's the biggest keyword you would type in?
Townhouse in a certain area.
Okay.
Townhouse and location.
Townhouse and location, and I Google searched it, and then probably got all these Google searches, a bunch of ads and all kinds of stuff in there. And I clicked on something. Now, what you're enabled to do, what you can do is if they've landed on your page, what have you, you could then, when that person landed on your page, they landed on your page through a Google search. The challenge is that they probably didn't do anything. They probably went to your page and then went to the next one and went to the next one and the next one and 1,000 more pages during their buying cycle. Remember, you guys are in the most challenging digital buying cycle because it's a really long buying cycle. Well, for some people it happens right away. For me, it took 2 years. Anyways, so what you can do is if you put the right pixel and you have a UTM code, I don't want to get too specific, but there's a code you can put within your URL, and then you take that URL. I know that person clicked from a Google ad. When I go into Facebook, I could then take that code, put it into my ad campaign, and I can target everybody that landed on the page by clicking on a Google ad. Why is that important? Because those are the most high intent people. They've literally told you within their keywords exactly what they're looking for, and you will have all of that information and all of that data. You can not only find that person, you can retarget that person back and forth. You can literally take them from Google and shift them directly over to targeting them directly on Facebook or Instagram. Works miraculously. That whole UTM pixel tracking bit can get a little complicated, but you can always share that webinar which goes through the details
here's
of
what
it.
you want to take down. Go to Google and Google UTM generator.
Good.
It'll take you directly to that page where you can create that UTM link, which is a tracking link, right? And that's the UTM that we're talking about.
I still want to talk to account manager again.
Not him. Not him.
Wait. You guys aren't taking. You guys aren't writing all this. No. Yeah. No. Absolutely. I mean, there's tons of agencies out there. You guys, all these guys that are willing to certainly help.
What I really want to do is because I go to actually Target, fine dining, right? So those are my clients. So how if they click on the picture, I can send a message that this is my market. Talk to me. How can I do that?
Yeah.
Okay. How do I reach you?
How do you reach me?
Yeah.
We can go through Florence to reach me.
You can tweet at him.
You can tweet me.
You can tweet him. Questions? Are you letting us off easy? One question?
Not one question? What if I asked you guys a question to see if you were paying attention?
Yes.
No, I'm just kidding. Yeah.
And there's a quiz at the end of this session.
How do you use Facebook Live? Like, you didn't mention Live.
So Facebook Live, and how do we incorporate that? Well, we did mention Instagram Live, which I think right now with, let's say, health concerns, air bubbles, like air quotes, Instagram Live or Facebook Live would be a great tool because if you're really sad, no one's showing up to the open house because health concerns, right? Then that could be a great tool to use. But how would you recommend that they use these tools?
Absolutely. I would start by announcing it ahead of time as well, making it an event that you can build up to. With health concerns too, this could be something that would mitigate any objection as to why people would want to not tour our house. As well as keep in mind, not everyone has time to tour a bunch of different houses at once, and so or throughout the day. And so this is something that's very low commitment. They could do it within a few minutes. They could hop onto the platform too, but only if they know in advance this is coming. So something they can plan into their day. I would definitely recommend that, and try and make it a little bit more interactive too. Keep in mind, this isn't a YouTube 5-minute video that you're shooting. That's going to take a lot of content production as well as high quality content output. This is something you could simply do off your mobile device, walking through the house as well. And so this is something that is really cost effective for you, something that you can promote ahead of time and can mitigate a lot of the objections as to why people wouldn't want to tour a listing in person.
If you're going to do a live, though, make it live. Get feedback. There's a difference between, there's a reason that it has to be live. In other words, you mentioned a tour of a house. Well, you could do a tour of a house anytime, but if it's live, you can have them ask you questions, live questions, get involved, engage. Just consider the fact that it's live and use that. I see too many people doing lives that really shouldn't be live.
So like, for example, if you have a live feed going on, you can actually see the questions and comments that are coming in. So just make sure you're engaging and making it interactive versus like the big no-no in social media is don't broadcast, right? Because it's just you talking at somebody. Social media is social for a reason, and you want to engage them in conversation.
I saw a good one actually that I tuned into with actually, funny enough, a mortgage broker, where people had mortgage-related questions. All those people are likely buying a home. That's why they're asking these questions. So they used a mortgage broker to try to drive interest, and they asked questions, live questions. They even stumped the guy. But that's an interesting way of being able to ask live questions in the moment. I can do it directly from my desk. I don't have to make an appointment and go to somewhere. It's just an interesting other way to engage people through the platform.
And to Ryan's point, remember, always follow up. So you might have only like a very few select people who are consistently with you throughout the entire Instagram Live. And if they're engaged in asking questions, there's no downside in terms of direct messaging later on, be like, hey, did I answer all of your question? Because chances are that's going to stem into a deeper conversation and a more valuable, more qualified lead.
Isn't Instagram story only on the business side, or can people?
Nope, personal too.
I can't find it.
You can't find. If you swipe over, it'll go right to the Instagram story, and then you can pretty much just take your 10-second video or photo. So swipe to the right.
I'm trying to post you, but they won't let me because I only have 5 seconds.
It could be 1 second. You can still post it. We'll show you.
Okay.
Even a boomerang.
Okay, I got a two-part question. The first one is, how long are the videos good for in terms of best practices in IG and also in Facebook? And that's the first part. The second part is, what has worked well on either one of the platforms in terms of organic versus, let's say, somebody that's polished?
I'll answer the first question. For the videos, I would definitely consider bringing it back to my first point, where they are in the customer journey. So if it's really short and all about building awareness, don't worry about making it a lengthy video. It could be less than 30 seconds because that's going to be what captures attention, at least some intent to purchase, specifically through your agent itself. In terms of when people are actually considering the property, like we mentioned, virtual tourings, this opportunity to show in depth what the property has to offer, feel free to make it a lengthier video because you know that if someone's watching the entirety of that video, they're not just curious about listings, they're very specifically interested in that listing itself. And so I would say just if it's a later stage customer journey video, it's okay to be longer form content. It's okay to post it to Instagram TV instead of the Instagram feed itself. And earlier stages, short punchy videos just to generate attention and open up that sales funnel.
The one thing I'll add, when you ask how long should they be, I'm not sure if you meant how long do they last on the platform.
sorry.
I'm not sure. But one thing I can tell you, things don't last very long on social. They go through the feed pretty darn quick. Even if it's a paid ads as well, there's something called ad fatigue, where you just run something for just too long. Move on. Things move very, very, very fast. So that's why it's important, just because you spend all this time creating this one video, and you're like, I'm good for the month. It just doesn't work that way. We're talking hours, days, that kind of thing in terms of how long something can maintain relevance. You'll also see if you track the usage of most content, you usually see it's a big spike, and then it quickly dips down. There's nothing to say that to really bring back that content maybe a few months from now, but don't expect it to keep going high for a long period of time. It's just not the way the platforms work.
Yes, and I want to add to that in terms of, let's say you're running an ad on, say, Facebook or Instagram, and you're running it off of, say, you have 5 photos, really pretty photos that you took of your listing or the new project that you have. You'll see that past the first week, your cost per click and your cost per acquisition will likely go up because ad fatigue, right? And another number you want to check in your ad platform is the frequency. So if you're hitting, say, 3, that means somebody's seen your ad 3 times. You're like, why am I still seeing this? Then you probably want to switch up the visuals so that you have a refreshed set of visuals and they feel like they haven't seen it before, right?
Yeah.
So constantly refresh the ad visuals that you have to maintain a lower cost per click. But let's say the sales cycles now for real estate are much longer given a slower market. We're seeing that in Vancouver. Are we seeing that a bit in Toronto as well? Like a slightly longer sales cycle?
No, actually.
Or he's like flying off the shelves. We're selling everything. Everything here is gone. You can't buy anything. So let's say it takes a bit longer for you to sell the property. Then you want to take that into consideration when you're generating content and visuals for a project. Yeah? Cool. So I have to wrap this because I saw Frankie in the back frantically waving at me, which tells me time is up. So I want to thank Ryan and Davis for joining us today for this hour-and-a-half long session.